I've got lots of mugs, tea and coffee mugs. That's not me boasting, it'd be an odd thing to boast about, but just a statement of fact. I've got mugs I've had since I was probably 8 years old or something, and some other vintage ones even older than that. I've got mugs from places we've visited and events we've been to, and mugs that people have given me, themed mugs that match hobbies like fishing, mugs with my favourite type of car on them. I've got a mountain biking mug for days when I'm going mountain biking, which is great, but it's reached a point where we're double stacking the mugs on the shelf in the kitchen cupboard now, and it just always feels a bit precarious. So I want to create a bit more storage space in there for mugs, and I think I can make like a freestanding little shelf unit to stand in there for a layer of mugs to go on, so they're not just stood on top of other mugs. I think it'll be a lot safer. So what I have to do that with is some pine, or I'm calling it pine, some softwood. It's actually bits of framing timber left over from building my workshop, and off camera I've just ripped it down on the table saw into 1/2 inch thick boards. I've deliberately cut them a little bit over length, and basically just made them short enough to have enough infeed space at the saw without moving things around, if I'm honest. But that will give me more than enough material to work with. So hopefully I can join a set of these up into a panel, and that will be my shelf. And then I need to come up with some kind of leg arrangement for it to stand on. I suppose it'll be kind of like a small table to stand inside the cupboard, really. Could look at it that way. I don't want to fix it permanently, because if we want to move things around and put something different in that cupboard, then that would be in the way. So I figure I'll just have a freestanding thing, layer of mugs on the top, layer of mugs underneath. Hopefully problem solved. Now, I expect I could just butt joint these boards together, glue them up, and it'd probably be fine to support the mugs, especially if I put a batten underneath. But to make it a bit stronger, and because I think it'll be a more interesting project, I'm intending to tongue and groove them together, and I've got a combination plane to do it with. So the first thing I need to do is find the centre of the thickness of my board so that I can centre my tongue and my groove on it. Now, I've set my marking gauge to roughly 1/4 inch using a rule. If I then mark a line from each face, I can see whether they overlap, or if they don't. There's a big gap in the middle there, if you can see that. So I'll adjust that until I get it central, and that'll be my middle of my board, and then I can mark out my tongue and my groove, set the fence on the combination plane to accommodate that. And then once it's set for the first one, then obviously we're golden. We can just do the lot. So now if I mark from each face, the blade of the marking gauge fits into that same slot each side, so I'm bang on in the middle. So that gives me my centre mark. I'm just going to put a bit of pencil on it so that it's easier to see, especially for the camera. Now, the combination plane, the blades I have will do 1/4 inch tongue and 1/4 inch groove. So if I mark out 1/4 inch centred on that mark, that should be where we're going to cut to. So I'm going to start at the far end of the board and just take small cuts and then work my way back. So with the tongues cut, it's time to change from that tongue cutting blade to this 1/4 inch blade, which will do the groove to accept them. So I've changed my blade over. I've had to adjust the fence because the body of the blade, if you will, is narrower. This is a 1/4 inch blade. The tongue cutting blade is wider, so actually the centre doesn't end up in quite the same place. The best way I know to check alignment of the grooving cutter with the tongues I've just cut is to basically run it over the end of one of the tongues and see if I can kind of erase that tongue with it and if it actually matches up. And I've cut these pieces over length, so I've got a bit of spare material at the end, I can do that. But if you didn't have any bit of spare length on it to remove some of the tongue in order to check the fit, I don't really know the best way of doing it that isn't just very careful measuring. So if anyone knows a good way of doing that, then please let me know in the comments, and you know, let your fellow woodworking enthusiasts know how you do it, because I really don't. So that's my tongue and groove panel in effect made up. I just about managed to stop myself in time from cutting either a tongue or groove on the end piece. So I've got a plain front to it, and the other two pieces there. Clearly I need to clear up some of this lot before I do anything else, and I think actually one of those mugs is going to be used for its intended purpose. So tea break is definitely called for. Well, that was a particularly effective tea break, because going back into the kitchen enabled me to check the measurements of the inside of the cupboard where this is going to go. So I now know what to trim these down to, and just to show that very little goes to waste around here, the majority of those shavings, my wife said, oh, they'll be perfect for lighting the wood burner, so they'll actually go to some use. Now what I think I'm going to do, I'd like to make this panel up and trim it to size, to length, all in one go, but it's too big front to back. I haven't got enough in-feed space on the table saw to get that on there with the mitre gauge, and even the kind of turning the mitre gauge backwards trick isn't going to work, I don't think. So I'll have to cut them individually, but I've got a stop on the mitre gauge, so that'll be straightforward enough to get them consistent. If I square up one end, then cut them to length at the other end, so I've got two square ends as it were. I've got plenty of spare material here. I've probably got, yeah, about 120mm extra beyond what I need, so that makes life nice and easy, bit of margin for error. Now we did actually have a bit of a mishap with one of these pieces and managed to split it by kind of semi-dropping it, or dropping it whilst it was semi-held in the vise. Just a bit heavy-handed, but luckily I need to rip this down anyway to make the shelf the right size front to back to fit in the cupboard, so I can just remove the damaged part. If I just cut it there, that gets rid of the split, and it's close to the maximum that I can fit in the cupboard anyway. Now I need to figure out how I'm going to attach the legs to this. I'm going to need a couple of battens to do that, and maybe one in the middle as well, I think, over that length, just to maintain rigidity. I'm probably going to want to put 6 legs on it rather than just one at each corner. I've got some more offcuts of framing timber, so I can make some battens out of that to attach the legs to. I think that's going to be the simplest option. So just as with the pieces for the panel, I'm going to cut these rounded CLS corners off. That's all my components cut, and the way I'm planning to fix it together is to use battens to attach the legs. I've got it kind of laid out upside down here just to check. What I want to avoid is fixing into end grain, because obviously it's not strong. So I'm going to screw a batten onto the underneath of my panel, my shelf, and then screw the legs into that. So in each case I'll be fixing into side grain rather than end grain. For the middle, because if I just put a batten across, I would be fixing into the end grain, I've cut 2 little blocks that will act in the same way as those end pieces, and then I'm probably still going to fix a shorter batten between those blocks just to help give the shelf a little bit more rigidity. Get, you know, I don't know, 20 or 30 mugs on there. That's a fair bit of weight, I suppose. And then the only other considerations, how fussy I want to be in cleaning it up. Some of the wood's a little bit rough. I could plane it a little. Really, smoothing it is a job for the smoothing plane, but I must admit my default option is pick up the Veritas jack plane for anything I can get away with using it on, because it's just such a nice tool to use, so good. I've planed this leg up, and you can't beat that finish without spending absolutely hours sanding. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, I'm going to clean it up a bit. I'm not going to be too fussy. And at the end of the day, it's going to be sat inside a kitchen cupboard just holding some mugs. It's not fine furniture, this. But that's the plan. The only other thing that I thought of whilst I was working this all out is, for these end legs, the screws are going to be not too visible because they're going to be at the end. You're not going to kind of view them. And the rear one, similar. The front one, although that leg should be in line with the doors of the cupboard, and you won't really see it a lot of the time until you open the cupboard, they'll be quite visible. So I might try and use something a bit more subtle, like glue it and panel pin it perhaps. So I've worked out the spacing of my fixings on one of the battens, and then I can use that one to just transfer across to the second one and lay those out the same. It honestly doesn't matter, to be too precise with this. It's just a mug shelf and these are going to be hidden underneath, but it's good practice. Final hand plane of the job, the little block plane, just to put a small chamfer on the bottom of the legs, just to prevent them splintering so much if this is ever moved around a little bit. It's generally a good idea, and I figure it can't hurt. Right, it's another day because the project was delayed by lack of appropriate size fixing, so I had to go and get some more screws. I've got some that are just about the maximum I can actually fit in. Slightly shorter would have been good, but this was what was available. It's been mostly a hand tool project so far, and I'm going to carry on and use the hand screwdriver so I don't push these through the other side, because I can just countersink them. If I use the impact driver, there's a fair risk that I'm going to have the end of the screw poking through. Cool. So that's my little shelf unit made and ready to go in the kitchen cupboard and store my mugs more safely. Was it a mug's game to do that? I could have probably bought something from IKEA or wherever pretty cheaply to solve the same problem, and that would have saved me a lot of time and effort. But the thing people forget about saving time and effort is that's only really good if you don't want to spend the time and the effort. And actually, I've enjoyed doing this little project. I could have made it much simpler if I'd bought a wide enough board from somewhere to just not have to joint anything, but that would have cost me some money. This was effectively free apart from the electricity to run the lights and the table saw and dust extractor and stuff a little bit. I could have made it slightly simpler by just butt jointing these boards together instead of doing tongue and groove, and no doubt that would have been strong enough. To be honest, I just wanted to do the tongue and groove and have an excuse to use the combination plane, so it made it a more interesting project. So yes, if I charged something for my time, this has ended up being way more expensive than what I could have bought in the shops. But I'm not charging myself anything for my time. I'm considering it time well spent. I've enjoyed the project. I've got some practice using my tools. I've learned a little bit. I've polished my skills just a tiny little bit, and I've got a useful object at the end of it. So for me, that's a win-win. So thanks for watching. I'm supposed to do all the YouTube stuff and ask you to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel and all that malarkey. If you want to do that, great. It is encouraging, to be honest, but if you don't want to, that's also fine. This is just a hobby. I can't see me ever becoming a full-time YouTuber, doing loads of sponsorships and all that stuff. Realistically, not going to happen. I just thought I'd share this with like-minded people, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. So, yeah, that's about it. I'll see you again soon.